Picture a small box, packed in a hurry in the summer of 1791, while a mob pressed against the gates of a Paris palace. Inside it, a single pearl, a great grey drop the size of a thumb, hangs beneath a bow of diamonds. The woman who owned it would be dead within 2 years. The pearl would vanish for 200. And when it finally surfaced again, in a Geneva sale room in 2018, the auctioneer expected it to sell for 1, maybe 2 million. It sold for more than 36. No pearl had ever fetched so much. No jewel a queen had worn ever would again. Welcome back to Jewelry Pleasure. Thank you for every like and every comment you leave. They genuinely keep this channel going. Today we're chasing the royal jewels that walked into the world's great auction rooms and walked out having broken records. The pearls, the blue diamonds, the emerald tiaras and the little rings that sold for 50 times what anyone guessed. If you love this kind of story, subscribe and tap the bell so the next one finds you. First, one thing worth getting straight, because it changes how you read every number that follows. The most expensive jewels ever sold at auction are not royal at all. The CTF Pink Star went for over 71 million in Hong Kong in 2017. The Oppenheimer Blue took 57.5 million the year before. And the Blue Moon of Josephine, despite the imperial-sounding name, has no crown behind it whatsoever. A Hong Kong tycoon bought it and named it after his young daughter. Those are spectacular stones, and that's all they are. What you're about to see is different. These jewels rarely have the biggest gems. What they have instead is a name attached, and as you'll see, a name can multiply a price in ways a flawless diamond never can. Marie Antoinette's pearl and diamond pendant, the record. So let's start with the pearl from the box. It's an 18th century pendant, a large natural drop pearl, slightly irregular, hanging below a diamond bow set with a single oval diamond added later. Nothing about its size alone explains the price. The story does. When Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette prepared to flee the besieged Tuileries in 1791, her jewels were packed up and smuggled out of France, carried to Brussels by Count Mercy-Argenteau, then on to Vienna and into the safekeeping of the Austrian emperor, her own family. Marie Antoinette never escaped. Her daughter, Marie-Therese, the only one of her children to survive the revolution, eventually received the jewels and passed them down a single private line, the Bourbon-Parma family, where they sat unseen for roughly 200 years. Then, in November 2018, Sotheby's put the pendant up in Geneva with an estimate of around 1 to 2 million francs. The bidding stopped at over 36 million, about 18 times the high estimate, and more than 3 times the previous record for any pearl, Elizabeth Taylor's La Peregrina. A Sotheby's specialist called it the Marie Antoinette factor at work. The buyer stayed anonymous. The pearl had outlived the Queen, the Revolution, and the dynasty that hid it, and nobody outside that family had laid eyes on it in 2 centuries. The rest of her jewels, the Bourbon-Parma sail and the ring with a lock of hair. The pendant didn't come up alone. It was the centerpiece of a single sale, royal jewels from the Bourbon-Parma family, and the rest of that evening tells you just as much about what a name is worth. Every one of the 100 lots sold. The total reached around $53 million, more than 7 times the high estimate, with bidders calling in from 43 countries. It became the highest-grossing royal jewel auction in history, and the smallest pieces produced the wildest results. A modest diamond ring, monogrammed with the letters MA in rose-cut stones and holding a lock of Marie Antoinette's hair, had been estimated at $8,000 to $10,000. It sold for nearly $444,000, about 50 times its estimate. A 3-strand necklace of her natural pearls took roughly $2.5 million. Three years later, a separate piece came up at Christie's. A pair of diamond bracelets, 3 strands, 112 stones, kept in a faded blue velvet box marked, in old script, bracelets of Queen Marie Antoinette. She'd bought them herself in 1776. They sold for over $8 million, the highest price ever paid for a diamond jewel with her name on it. The diamonds were lovely. They were never the point. The Wittelsbach-Graff Diamond, a crown jewel, and a recut that outraged the experts. Now to a stone that broke a record and then started a fight. The Wittelsbach-Graff is a deep greyish-blue diamond of just under 36 carats, dug from the Kolar mine in India centuries ago. It belonged to 2 sets of crown jewels, Austrian and Bavarian, and sat at the centre of the Bavarian royal crown from 1806. The last time the public saw it, it was glinting at the funeral of King Ludwig III in 1921. Then it disappeared into private hands. In December 2008, Christie's sold it in London for more than $24 million, a world record for any diamond at the time. The buyer was the jeweller Lawrence Graff. And then he did something that horrified the historians. He had the stone recut, shaving it down by several carats to sharpen its color and clarity. One celebrated diamond cutter called the decision the end of culture. A German museum director compared it to painting over a Rembrandt. Graff was unmoved. He said he'd simply removed the blemishes and revealed the stone's true perfection. A few years later he's reported to have sold it to the Emir of Qatar for something like $80 million. The crown it once anchored no longer exists in the form Ludwig III knew. The diamond, slightly smaller now, does. The Beau Sancy, 400 years, 4 crowns. Some stones pass through one royal house. The Beau Sancy passed through several, and it's a pear-shaped, double rose-cut Golconda diamond of just under 35 carats with a resume that reads like a tour of European power. It sat in the coronation crown of Marie de Medici in 1610. It moved to the House of Orange. It glittered in the English crown jewels under William and Mary. It ended up in the royal crown of Prussia. By 2012 it belonged to George Friedrich, Prince of Prussia, head of the House of Hohenzollern, who decided to let it go. 5 bidders fought over it at Sotheby's in Geneva for about 8 minutes. It sold for around $9.5 million, more than double the estimate, to a buyer who stayed in the shadows. 400 years, 4 crowns, and at the end of it a stone small enough to close your hand around. The Henkel von Donnersmarck Emerald Tiara, the most expensive tiara ever. If the title of this video promised you crowns, here's the one that holds the record. 11 pear-shaped Colombian emeralds, over 500 carats of green between them, dropped from a frame of diamonds. It was made around 1900, commissioned by Prince Guido Henkel von Donnersmarck, one of the richest men in Europe, for his second wife, Princess Katerina. The emeralds carry their own whispered history. They're rumored to have come from a Maharaja's treasury, and possibly before that from Empress Eugénie of France, though no one has ever proven it, so treat that as legend rather than fact. What isn't legend is the price. In May 2011, Sotheby's sold the tiara in Geneva for over $12.5 million. No tiara has sold for more, before or since. When you next hear someone call a tiara priceless, remember there's a number, and that's it. Princess Margaret's Poltimore tiara, the tiara a princess bought herself. There's a photograph almost everyone has seen, even without knowing the name behind it. A young woman lying back in a bath, wearing nothing but a tiara. The woman is Princess Margaret, the Queen's younger sister. The tiara is the Poltimore, and unlike almost every other jewel in this video, she bought it herself. In 1959, breaking the royal habit of borrowing from the family vaults, Margaret went to a Sotheby's sale and bought the diamond cluster and scroll tiara, made by Gerard around 1870 for Florence, Lady Poltimore, for £5,500. It was hers, not the crown's. She wore it at her 1960 wedding to the photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, and then in that famous bath. When Margaret died in 2002, her children, David, Viscount Linley, and Lady Sarah Chatto, were left with a tax bill, and the tiara went to Christie's in 2006. It was a clever thing, this piece. It came apart into a necklace and 11 separate brooches, with its own little screwdriver to do the work. It sold for over £900,000, around 5 times the estimate. The sale is said to have broken Lord Snowdon's heart. He reportedly wrote to his children begging them to stop it. Their answer was the plain one families give: when someone dies, the taxes come due. A private buyer carried it abroad, and it hasn't been seen in public since. The Baroda pearls, 2 strands where there were once 7. Here's something worth knowing about natural pearls before the number lands. You can't manufacture a matched strand of them. Each one forms by chance inside an oyster, and to gather dozens of the same size, color, and luster, a buyer once had to sift through tens of thousands. That rarity is why a great pearl necklace was, for centuries, a measure of a dynasty's reach. The Maharajas of Baroda, the Gaekwad rulers of Western India, among the richest princes on earth, owned one of the greatest ever strung, 7 rows of perfectly graduated natural pearls. Over the generations it was taken apart and remade, and by the time it reached Christie's in New York in April 2007, it had been reduced to 2 strands, 68 pearls, the largest close to 16 millimeters across. 2 strands where there had once been 7. And it still sold for just over $7 million, at the time, a world record for a natural pearl necklace. The buyer bid quietly by telephone and left no name, carrying off what remained of a treasure the Gaekwads had spent generations building. Empress Eugénie's diamond bow brooch, the auction that never happened. This next one nearly didn't sell at all. Empress Eugénie, wife of Napoleon III, owned a great diamond bow brooch made by the French jeweler François Kramer in 1855, a cascade of stones designed to be pinned across a bodice. It was set to cross the block at Christie's in New York in April 2008. Hours before the sale, a court order stopped it cold. The auction was cancelled, and rather than let the brooch slip back into obscurity, Christie's negotiated a private deal instead, selling it to the Louvre in Paris for $10.5 million, well above the estimate. For a few hours that April it looked gone for good. Instead it went on display in the Louvre's Galerie d'Apollon, where anyone with a ticket could stand in front of it. Until one morning in October 2025, when thieves broke into that gallery in broad daylight and were gone in minutes, the brooch among their haul. It hasn't been recovered. The Anglesey necklace, 2 coronations, 300 carats, and a rumour. Picture the same necklace in Westminster Abbey at 2 coronations, 16 years apart, worn by 2 different women who held the same title. Margaret, Marchioness of Anglesey, wore it to crown George VI in 1937. She died in 1946. The necklace stayed in the family, and at Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953 her daughter-in-law Shirley, the next Marchioness of Anglesey, wore the very same diamonds. The necklace itself is a Georgian piece from around the turn of the 19th century, roughly 300 carats spread across some 500 old cushion-cut diamonds, very likely from the Golconda mines, built as a pair of diamond tassels that could be worn knotted, draped, or wrapped as a belt. It stayed with the Paget family until the 1960s, then disappeared into a private collection for about 50 years. When Sotheby's brought it back to Geneva in November 2024, they raised a tantalizing possibility that some of its diamonds might trace back to the infamous Collier de la Reine, the necklace at the heart of the scandal that helped bring down Marie Antoinette. There's no proof, but the rumor was enough to set 7 bidders fighting for 7 minutes. It sold for nearly $5 million. The Duchess of Windsor collection, the jewels a king abdicated to give. And we end with a love story that cost a throne. In 1936, King Edward VIII gave up the British crown to marry Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American. He couldn't give her a country, so he gave her jewels, drawer after drawer of them, much of it from Cartier, and they became the most talked-about private collection of the 20th century. After Wallis died, those jewels came to Sotheby's in Geneva in April 1987. Sotheby's had quietly estimated the collection at about $7.5 million. It made over $50 million, close to 7 times that. And for 2 decades it stood as the benchmark for a single-owner royal sale. One onyx and diamond Cartier Panther bracelet that fetched just over $1 million in 1987 came back to auction in 2010 and sold for more than 7, a record for the house. Elizabeth Taylor bought one of the brooches that night and wore it for the rest of her life. There's a story that Edward, possessive even from beyond the grave, wanted the jewels broken up after Wallis died so no other woman could ever wear them. If he did wish it, the wish was ignored. The jewels were sold whole, scattered across the world, and women have been wearing them ever since. So what actually shatters these records? Look back across all of it and the gemstones almost never explain the prices. The pink star, with no history behind it, sells for more than any of them, and is forgotten the next season. But a pearl a doomed queen packed in a hurry, a diamond cut from a crown that no longer exists, a ring holding a lock of hair, a necklace that stood through 2 coronations, those sell for 10, 20, 50 times what anyone dares to estimate. You're not bidding on the stone. You're bidding on everyone who touched it before you. And the history doesn't stop the day the hammer falls. Ask the Louvre, which paid millions for Eugénie's brooch only to watch it carried out the door in 2025. These jewels never really come to rest. Which of these would you have raised your hand for? Tell me in the comments. And if you want the next chapter of stories like these, you know what to do. Until then, thank you for watching Jewelry Pleasure.